If we could take a voyage through our solar system, we would find little in the black monotony of space, except the planets, huge balls of gas and dust and rock that revolve through the emptiness around the sun. Each of the planets in our solar system is special in its own way. Saturn, of course, is distinguished by its broad circle of rings. Deeper into space is the odd sideways world, Uranus, revolving around an axis that points toward the center of the solar system. Turning back toward the sun, we find a small blue planet. It is distinguished by its vast oceans of liquid water, its oxygen-rich atmosphere, and by one special and wondrous feature found nowhere else in the solar system. The planet is Earth, and the wonder is life. For us, inhabitants of planet Earth, living things are part of our everyday experience. And recognizing the difference between life and non-life is something we just seem to know. But how do we know? What tells us something is alive? Well, many times we recognize living shapes and structures. For instance, here is an unusual animal, a spiny echidna. Chances are you have never seen one before, but you surely know it's alive. One thing that might have tipped you off was its coat of spines, because spines are common features among living things. Spines are found in a whole range of creatures, from aquatic animals, such as the sea urchin, to desert plants, such as the cactus. To us, life seems to have a familiar look, a look of organization and complexity. Living things appear ordered and symmetrical in a way that non-living things rarely do. Sometimes, however, looking for familiar body shapes and structures may not be enough to recognize life. For example, this is a horned lizard. You can see that its shape and its color closely resemble the desert floor on which it lives, and at first glance, you might mistake it for just another rock. But when the heat of midday forces the lizard to seek shade, you instantly know this is a living creature because it moved. It reacted to its environment. Living things respond to stimulation. They move or change, and that response tells us they're alive. Of course, responsiveness and having a living shape are not necessarily all it takes for something to be alive. For instance, we all know that this toy is not alive, yet it has these two features of life. It has a living shape, and it seems to respond to stimulation. Then what's missing? What other factors make life different from non-life? Maybe the answer can be found if we look for other common features among the great diversity of organisms. Despite the striking differences in their appearance, all living creatures share a number of fundamental characteristics. Think about those things all animals must do to be alive. One of the first to come to mind, especially around mealtime, is the requirement for food. All living things need fuel, metabolism, the chemical processes of life, requires energy and raw materials, and those things come from food. For animals, the food that fuels metabolism is the flesh of plants, or, as in the case of these lions, the flesh of other animals. For plants, however, food is manufactured from water and nutrients and the energy from the sun by the process of photosynthesis. A living cell is much like a tiny machine, and unfortunately, it's this machine-like quality that makes the need for fuel a poor clue for recognizing what is alive. Obviously, there are many non-living things in our world that require fuel to be active. Therefore, the need for fuel is a poor way to recognize life. So, where does that leave us? We've seen that life cannot be distinguished from non-life by its shape, its response to stimuli, or by metabolism. But there are other features of life. For instance, all living things have a lifespan, the period of time between birth and death. And during that span, individuals grow and develop. For most animals, the process of growth and development requires months or years. There's another feature of all living things, a feature that seems almost at the foundation of life itself. Reproduction. It might seem that processes as dynamic as reproduction, growth, and development would be unique to life. But surprisingly, there is a non-living event that is very similar: the formation of mineral crystals. This time-lapse footage shows what appears to be a creature budding off new colony members, clones of itself. But in fact, this is crystal growth, the formation of exact copies of crystalline structures by the evaporation of a solution. So once again, we've failed to find a characteristic that clearly distinguishes life from non-life. It turns out, however, we're not alone. Finding a feature unique to life has been a dilemma for biologists for centuries. Dr. Gary Adest is a researcher at California State University.
The reason life is so difficult to define is because life is such a complex and variable phenomenon. If there were only one kind of plant or one kind of animal on the planet, then defining life would be a simple matter. But because there are millions of species and multitudes of body plans and numerous ways of making a living, defining life becomes somewhat difficult. In fact, most scientists define life by a set of requirements. In order to be life, all of these requirements have to be met.
Life must first metabolize, or use energy and chemicals to carry on living functions. Life also responds to stimulus. It reacts to changes and challenges in the environment. The response can be a subtle movement or an energetic escape from a would-be predator. A living thing must reproduce itself. The survival of every creature depends on its ability to produce the next generation. And new life grows and develops and takes its proper place in the environment. In addition, every living thing is composed of cells, whether it is just a single cell or billions of cells working together in one body.
Finally, life possesses nucleic acids. DNA and RNA. Changes in these nucleic acids, called mutations, are also characteristic of life. As these changes accumulate over time, life undergoes adaptation. Once again, in order to be life, all of these requirements must be met.
The ability to adapt to the changing environment may be the feature that makes living things most different from non-living things. From the time life began on Earth, the power to cope with variations in the climate, the food supply, and other vital factors has been the key to survival, and also the key to the evolution of the grand diversity of species that inhabit the planet. Many adaptations of plants and animals are fairly easy to find and understand. For example, for some desert plants, such as these cacti, adaptation means having a broad network of surface roots to capture water from infrequent rainstorms before it's lost to the porous soil. The long list of features in the scientific definition of life marks a sharp boundary between living and non-living. But still, there is a group of beings that straddle the two worlds. The viruses. Viruses possess many of the features of life, yet without the presence of a living cell, they are inanimate, non-living particles. For science, viruses seem to exist at the shadowy fringe between the chemistry of life and life itself. From what we have seen, it is clear that our definition of life comes from our experience with living things. This brings us to an interesting question. Since we define life based on what we see on Earth, what happens to our definition when we leave the planet? This was a question faced by NASA scientists searching for life on Mars. If there was life on the stony red surface of Mars, how would it compare to life on our moist green Earth? Dr. Norman Horowitz designed many of the experiments for the Viking mission.
We searched for life on Mars by applying the principles we have learned from the study of life on Earth. Basically, we made three kinds of observations. We looked for living shapes and movements. We looked for complex carbon compounds, and we searched for evidence of metabolism by bacteria in the soil.
Pictures of the Martian landscape were taken by cameras on the Viking lander. Scanning the surface revealed nothing that moved or looked alive, just rocks and sand. A special instrument on the spacecraft analyzed the Martian surface, searching for the complex carbon compounds present in all living things. And again, nothing was found. Finally, the instrument looking for metabolism by bacteria did find the presence of metabolism-like chemistry, but it turned out to be chemical reactions unrelated to life.
One other thing vital to life was missing on Mars: liquid water. Without it, the chemistry of life is impossible. It appears that the Earth is the only planet in our part of the universe inhabited by life.
Earth, it seems, is an island of life. In our solar system, it alone has the gentle nature to have and hold living things. But the universe is a very big place, and the chances are there are other living islands in the sea of stars.